He had broken his feudal lance against the windmill. The image suggested by de Circadia persisted in his mind. He realized it was only by sheer good fortune that he had escaped unhurt. There remained the wind itself, the whirlwind. The events in Rennes, a reflex of the graver events in Nantes, had set that wind blowing in his favor. He set out briskly to retrace his steps toward the Place Royale. The gathering of the populace was greatest there, and he judged it to be the heart and brain of the commotion exciting the city. But the commotion he had left there was nothing compared to what he found on his return. Earlier, there had been a comparative hush to listen to a speaker denouncing the First and Second Estates from the pedestal of the statue of Louis XV. Now, the air vibrated with the angry voice of the multitude itself. Here and there, men fought with canes and fists. A fierce excitement raged everywhere, and the gendarmes sent by the king's lieutenant to restore order were helpless flotsam in that tempestuous human ocean. There were cries of,
"To the Palais! Down with the assassins! Down with the nobles! To the Palais!"
An artisan standing shoulder to shoulder with him in the crowd explained the increased excitement.
"They've shot him dead. His body is lying there where it fell at the foot of the statue. And another student was killed not an hour ago over there by the cathedral works. By God, if they can't prevail in one way, they'll prevail in another."
The man was fiercely emphatic.
"They'll stop at nothing. If they can't overawe us, they'll assassinate us. They are determined to conduct these states of Brittany in their own way. No interests but their own shall be considered."
André-Louis left him talking and forced his way through the human press. At the statue's base, he came upon a small cluster of students gathered around the murdered lad's body. All of them were stricken with fear and helplessness.
"You hear, Moreau?"
A voice said. He looked around to find himself confronted by a slight, swarthy man of little more than 30. The man had a firm mouth and an impertinent nose, and he looked at André-Louis with disapproval. It was Le Chapelier, a lawyer of Rennes and a prominent member of the city's literary chamber. He was a forceful man, fertile in revolutionary ideas and gifted with exceptional eloquence.
It is you, Chapelier. Why don't you speak to them? Why don't you tell them what to do? Up with you, man."
He pointed to the plinth. Le Chapelier's dark, restless eyes searched the other's impassive face for some trace of the irony he suspected. The two were poles apart in their political views. While André-Louis was mistrusted by all his colleagues in the literary chamber of Rennes, none mistrusted him as thoroughly as this vigorous Republican. Indeed, if Le Chapelier had been able to overcome the influence of the seminarist Vilmorin, André-Louis would have long since been excluded from that assembly of intellectual youth. He exasperated them with his eternal mockery of their ideals. So now, Le Chapelier suspected mockery in that invitation. He suspected it even when he failed to find traces of it on André-Louis's face, having learned from experience that it was a face not often to be trusted for an indication of the real thoughts behind it.
"Your notions and mine on that score can hardly coincide,"
he said.
"Can there be two opinions?"
André-Louis asked.
"There are usually two opinions whenever you and I are together, Moreau. And more than ever now that you are the appointed delegate of a nobleman. You see what your friends have done. No doubt you approve of their methods."
He was coldly hostile. André-Louis looked at him without surprise. Since they were invariably opposed in academic debates, how could Le Chapelier suspect his present intentions?
"If you won't tell them what is to be done, I will,"
he said.
"In God's name, if you want to invite a bullet from the other side, I will not hinder you. It may help to square the account."
He repented the words almost as soon as they were out, for André-Louis sprang up onto the plinth as if answering a challenge. Alarmed now, Le Chapelier assumed André-Louis intended to speak on behalf of privilege as a publicly appointed representative. He clutched André-Louis's leg to pull him back down.
"Ah, no,"
he shouted.
"Come down, you fool. Do you think we will let you ruin everything with your clowning? Come down." André-Louis maintained his position by clutching one of the legs of the bronze horse.
He flung his voice like a bugle note over the heads of the seething mob.
Citizens of Rennes, the motherland is in danger.
The effect was electric. A stir ran across the upturned faces like a ripple over water, followed by complete silence. In that great silence, they looked at this slim young man. He was hatless, with long wisps of his black hair fluttering in the breeze. His neckcloth was in disorder, his face white, and his eyes on fire. André-Louis felt a sudden surge of exultation. He realized by instinct that he had seized the crowd at one grip and held it fast in the spell of his cry and audacity. Even Le Chapelier, though still clinging to his ankle, had ceased tugging. Though unshaken in his assumption about André-Louis's intentions, the reformer was momentarily bewildered by the first note of his appeal. And then, slowly and impressively, in a voice that traveled clear to the ends of the square, the young lawyer of Gavrillac began to speak.
Shuddering in horror at the vile deed perpetrated here, my voice demands to be heard. You have seen murder done under your eyes. It was the murder of one who nobly, without thought of himself, gave voice to the wrongs oppressing us all. Fearing that voice, and shunning the truth as foul things shun the light, our oppressors sent their agents to silence him in death.
Le Chapelier finally released his hold on André-Louis's ankle, staring up at him in sheer amazement. It seemed the fellow was in earnest, serious for once, and for once on the right side. What had come over him?
What shall you look for from assassins but assassination? I have a tale to tell which will show that this is no new thing you have witnessed here today. It will reveal the forces you have to deal with. Yesterday.
There was an interruption. A voice in the crowd, some 20 paces away, shouted out.
Yet another of them.
Immediately after the voice came a pistol shot, and a bullet flattened itself against the bronze figure just behind André-Louis. Instantly, there was turmoil in the crowd, most intense around the spot where the shot had been fired. The assailant belonged to a considerable group of the opposition. This group found itself beset on every side and hard-pressed to defend him. From the foot of the plinth, the students' voices rang out, chorusing with Le Chapelier to bid André-Louis seek shelter.
Come down at once. They'll murder you just as they murdered La Rivière. Let them.
He flung his arms wide in a supremely theatrical gesture and laughed.
I stand here at their mercy. Let them add my blood to the blood that will presently rise up to choke them. Let them assassinate me. It is a trade they understand. But until they do so, they shall not prevent me from speaking to you. They shall not prevent me from telling you what to expect from them.
He laughed again, not merely in exultation as the watchers below supposed, also in amusement. His amusement had two sources. One was discovering how glibly he uttered the phrases proper to whip up a crowd's emotions. The other was remembering how the crafty Cardinal de Retz used to hire men to fire on his carriage to inflame popular sympathy. He was in just such a case as that arch-politician. True, he had not hired the fellow to fire the pistol shot. He was none the less obliged to him and ready to derive full advantage from the act. The group protecting the gunman battled on, trying to hew a way out of the angry, heaving press.
Let them go.
André-Louis called down.
What matters one assassin more or less? Let them go, and listen to me, my countrymen.
Presently, when some order was restored, he began his tale, using simple language, yet with a vehemence and directness that drove home every point. He tore their hearts with the story of yesterday's happenings at Gavrillac. He drew tears with the pathos of his picture of the bereaved widow Maybe and her 3 starving, destitute children, orphaned to avenge the death of a pheasant. He spoke of the bereaved mother of M. de Vilmorin, a student of Rennes known to many of them. He had met his death in a noble endeavor to champion the cause of an esurient member of their afflicted order.
The Marquis de la Tour d'Azyr said of him that he had too dangerous a gift of eloquence. He killed him to silence his brave voice, but he has failed in his object. I, poor Philippe de Vilmorin's friend, have assumed the mantle of his apostleship. I speak to you with his voice today.
It was a statement that finally helped Le Chapelier understand, at least in part, this bewildering change in André-Louis, rendering him faithless to the side that employed him.
I am not here merely to demand vengeance upon Philippe de Vilmorin's murderers.
André-Louis continued.
I am here to tell you the things he would have told you today had he lived.
So far, at least, he was frank. But he did not add that these were things he did not believe himself. He considered them the cant by which an ambitious bourgeoisie, speaking through lawyers, sought to overthrow the present state of things to its own advantage. He left his audience believing that the views he expressed were the ones he held. Now, in a terrible voice and with an eloquence that amazed himself, he denounced the inertia of royal justice when the great are the offenders. With bitter sarcasm, he spoke of their king's lieutenant, M. de Lesdiguières.
Do you wonder that M. de Lesdiguières should administer the law so that it is always favorable to our great nobles?
He asked.
Would it be just or reasonable for him to administer it otherwise?
He paused dramatically to let his sarcasm sink in. It had the effect of reawakening Le Chapelier's doubts and checking his dawning conviction in André-Louis's sincerity. Where was he going now? He was not left in doubt for long. Proceeding, André-Louis spoke exactly as he conceived Philippe de Vilmorin would have spoken. He had argued with him so often and attended the literary chamber discussions so frequently that he had all the reformers' rant at his fingertips. And it was true in substance.
Consider the composition of this France of ours. 1 million of its inhabitants are members of the privileged classes. They compose France. They are France. For surely you cannot suppose the remainder matters. It cannot be pretended that 24 million souls are of any account, that they can represent this great nation, or that they exist for any purpose but servitude to the million elect.
Bitter laughter shook the crowd, just as he desired.
Seeing their privileges in danger of invasion by these 24 millions, mostly canaille created to be slaves, does it surprise you that the dispensing of royal justice is placed in the stout hands of these Lesdiguières? Men without brains to think or hearts to be touched. Consider what must be defended against our assault. Consider a few of the feudal rights in danger of being swept away if the privileged yield even to their sovereign's commands and admit the third estate to an equal vote. What would become of the right of terrage on the land, of parciere on the fruit trees, of carpot on the vines? What of the corvées by which they command forced labor? What of the ban de vendange, giving them the first vintage, or the banvin, enabling them to control the sale of wine? What of their right to grind the last coin of taxation from the people to maintain their opulent estate? The cens and lods-et-vents absorb 1/5 of the land's value. The blairy must be paid before herds can feed on communal lands. The pulverage indemnifies them for dust raised on their roads by herds going to market. There is the sextilage on everything sold in public markets, the etalonage, and all the rest. What of their rights over men and animals for field labor, over ferries and bridges, sinking wells, warrens, dovecots, fires which yields them a tax on every peasant hearth? What of their exclusive fishing and hunting rights, the violation of which is almost a capital offense? And what of other rights, unspeakable and abominable, over the lives and bodies of their people? Rights which, if rarely exercised, have never been rescinded. To this day, if a noble returning from the hunt were to slay 2 of his serfs to bathe his feet in their blood, he could claim his absolute feudal right as a sufficient defense. Roughshod, these million privileged ride over the souls and bodies of 24 million contemptible canaille existing only for their pleasure. Woe betide anyone who raises his voice in the name of humanity against these excessive abuses. I have told you of one remorselessly slain in cold blood for doing no more than that. Your own eyes have witnessed the assassination of another upon this plinth, yet another by the cathedral works, and the attempt upon my own life. Between them and the justice due to them stand these Lesdiguières, these king's lieutenants. They are not instruments of justice, but walls erected to shelter privilege and abuse. Do you wonder that they will not yield an inch? They resist the election of a third estate with the voting power to sweep all these privileges away. They refuse to submit themselves to a just equality with the meanest of the canaille they trample underfoot. They refuse to provide that the money necessary to save the state from bankruptcy shall be raised by taxation borne by themselves in equal proportion. Sooner than yield, they prefer to resist even the royal command.
A phrase Vilmorin had used yesterday occurred to him. He had refused to attach importance to it then, but he used it now.
In doing this, they are striking at the very foundations of the throne. These fools do not perceive that if the throne falls, it is those standing nearest to it who will be crushed.
A terrific roar acclaimed that statement. Tense and quivering with excitement, he stood a moment smiling ironically. Then he waved them into silence, seeing by their ready obedience how completely he possessed them. In his voice, they each recognized their own, giving expression to the thoughts that had been stirring inarticulately in their minds. Presently he resumed, speaking more quietly, the ironic smile growing more marked.
In taking my leave of M. de Lesdiguières, I gave him a warning from natural history. I told him that when wolves, roaming singly through the jungle, weary of being hunted by the tiger, they band themselves into packs and hunt the tiger in turn. M. de Lesdiguières contemptuously answered that he did not understand me. But your wits are better than his. You understand me, I think, don't you?
A great roar, mingled with approving laughter, was his answer. He had wrought them up to a dangerous passion, and they were ripe for any violence. If he had failed with the windmill, at least he was now master of the wind.
To the palais.
They shouted, brandishing canes and swords.
To the palais. Down with M. de Lesdiguières. Death to the king's lieutenant.
He was master of the wind indeed. His dangerous gift of oratory had given him this mastery. At his bidding, the gale would sweep away the windmill against which he had flung himself in vain. But that was no part of his intent.
Ah, wait.
He bade them.
Is this miserable instrument of a corrupt system worth your noble indignation?
He hoped his words would be reported to M. de Lesdiguières. It would be good for the soul of the king's lieutenant to hear the undiluted truth about himself for once.
It is the system itself you must attack and overthrow, not a mere instrument. Precipitancy will spoil everything. Above all, my children, no violence.
My children, if only his godfather could have heard him.
You have seen the result of premature violence elsewhere in Brittany and France. Violence on your part will call for violence on theirs. They will welcome the chance to assert their mastery with a firmer grip. The military will be sent for, and you will face the bayonets of mercenaries. Do not provoke that, I implore you. Do not give them the pretext they welcome to crush you down into the mud of your own blood.
Out of the silence broke a cry.
What else, then? What else? I will tell you.
He answered.
The wealth and strength of Brittany lie in Nantes, a bourgeois city made prosperous by the energy of the bourgeoisie and the toil of the people. This movement began in Nantes, resulting in the king's order dissolving the states as now constituted. Those who base their power on privilege and abuse do not hesitate to thwart this order. Let Nantes be informed of the precise situation, and let nothing be done here until Nantes has given us the lead. She has the power to make her will prevail. Let her exert that power once more, and until she does, keep the peace in Rennes. Thus shall you triumph. Thus shall the outrages perpetrated under your eyes be fully avenged.
As abruptly as he had leapt upon the plinth, he leapt down. He had finished. He had said all that could have been said by his dead friend. But the crowd would not let him extinguish himself. The thunder of their acclamations rose deafeningly. He had played upon their emotions like a skillful harpist, leaving them vibrant with the passions he had aroused and the high note of hope on which he closed his symphony. A dozen students caught him as he leapt down and swung him to their shoulders. The delicate Le Chapelier pressed alongside him with a flushed face and shining eyes.
My lad,
he said,
you have kindled a fire today that will sweep the face of France in a blaze of liberty.
He then issued a sharp command to the students.
To the literary chamber at once. We must concert measures instantly. A delegate must be dispatched to Nantes to convey the message of the people of Rennes.
The crowd fell back. opening a lane through which the students bore the hero of the hour. Waving his hands, he called upon them to disperse to their homes and await in patience what must follow very soon.
You have endured for centuries with a fortitude that is a pattern to the world.
He flattered them.
Endure a little longer yet. The end, my friends, is well in sight at last.
They carried him out of the square and up the Rue Royale to an old house. In an upper chamber lighted by yellow glass panes, the literary chamber held its meetings. Members came hurrying in, summoned by Le Chapelier's messages. Behind closed doors, a flushed group of some 50 men hailed André-Louis as the strayed sheep returning to the fold, smothering him in congratulations. They settled down to deliberate upon immediate measures, while a self-improvised guard of honor kept the doors below. This was very necessary, as the house was soon assailed by the gendarmerie of M. de Lestiguières, dispatched to arrest the firebrand inciting the people to sedition. The force consisted of 50 men. 500 would have been too few. The mob broke their carbines and heads, beating them into a well-advised retreat. While that took place in the street below, the eloquent Le Chapelier addressed his colleagues upstairs. With no bullets to fear and no one to report his words, his oratory flowed unintimidated. He praised the vigor and greatness of Moreau's speech, above all its wisdom. Moreau's words had surprised them, as he was previously known only as a bitter critic of their reforms. But they understood his conversion. The murder of their dear colleague Vilmorin had produced this change. Today he had proven himself their stoutest apostle. Let them pack like wolves, and send a delegate to Nantes to ensure uniform action. He invited them to elect the delegate. André-Louis, on a bench near the window, a prey to reaction, listened in bewilderment. As the applause died down, a voice exclaimed,
I propose we appoint our leader here, Le Chapelier, to be that delegate.
Le Chapelier reared his elegantly dressed head, revealing a pale countenance. Nervously, he fingered a gold spyglass.
My friends,
he said slowly,
I am deeply sensible of the honor, but in accepting it, I should usurp an honor belonging elsewhere. Who could represent us better than the champion who has so incomparably given utterance to the voice of this great city? Confer this honor upon André-Louis Moreau.
Rising in response to the storm of applause, André-Louis bowed and yielded.
Be it so,
he said simply.
It is perhaps fitting that I carry out what I have begun. I will set out tonight. You will set out at once, my lad.
Le Chapelier informed him, revealing the true source of his generosity.
It is not safe for you to linger an hour in Rennes. You must go secretly. De Lestiguières will have you laid by the heels, and it will be good night for you.
André-Louis rode out from Rennes, committed to a deeper adventure than he had ever dreamed of when he left the sleepy village of Gavrillac. He spent the night at a roadside inn and set out again early the next morning. He reached Nantes soon after noon on the following day. During that long and lonely ride across the dull plains of Brittany, which looked their absolute dreariest in their winter colors, he had plenty of time to think about his actions and his current situation. Up until now, he had taken a purely academic and rather unfriendly interest in the new philosophies of social life. He had only used these new ideas to sharpen his wits, much like a fencer practices his eye and wrist with foils, without ever letting himself believe the issues were truly real. Now, he found himself suddenly transformed into a revolutionary firebrand, fully committed to the most desperate kind of revolutionary action. He was the representative and delegate of a nobleman in the states of Brittany, yet he found himself simultaneously and incongruously acting as the representative and delegate for the entire third estate of Rennes. It was difficult to determine how much he might have deceived himself yesterday, caught up in the heat of passion and swept along by the torrent of his own speech. But it was certainly true that, looking back on it calmly now, he had no illusions at all about what he had done. He had cynically presented his audience with only one side of the great question he had raised. However, the established order in France acted as a protective wall for the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur. This system gave the Marquis complete immunity for this crime, and any other crimes he felt like committing. Therefore, the established order had to face the consequences of its own wrongdoing. In that fact, André-Louis saw his clear justification. And so, he felt no doubts as he arrived on his errand of rebellion in the beautiful city of Nantes. With its spacious streets and splendid port, Nantes rivaled Bordeaux and Marseilles in prosperity. He found an inn on the Quai La Fosse and stabled his horse. He ate dinner in the alcove of a window that looked out over the tree-lined quay and the broad expanse of the Loire River, where merchant ships from all nations rode at anchor. The sun had broken through the clouds again, shedding its pale winter light over the yellow waters and the tall-masted ships. There was just as much bustling life along these quays as one would see on the quays of Paris. There were foreign sailors in strange clothes, speaking harsh-sounding foreign languages. There were strong fishwives with baskets of herrings on their heads, wearing bulky skirts above bare legs and feet, shouting their wares loudly and almost incomprehensibly. There were boatmen in woolen caps and loose trousers rolled up to their knees. Peasants in goatskin coats whose wooden shoes clattered against the round cobblestones. There were shipbuilders and laborers from the dockyards, along with bellows menders, rat catchers, water carriers, ink sellers, and other traveling peddlers. Mixed throughout this working-class crowd that constantly moved back and forth, André-Louis saw tradesmen in plain clothes and merchants in long, fur-lined coats. Occasionally, a wealthy merchant prince rolled past in his two-horse carriage, accompanied by the crack of a whip and his coachman's shouts to clear the way. Sometimes, a delicate lady was carried past in her sedan chair, perhaps with an affected abbé from the bishop's court hurrying along beside her. Now and then, an officer in a red uniform rode by with a look of disdain. Once, the massive carriage of a nobleman passed by, displaying a coat of arms on its panels and carrying a pair of powdered footmen in gorgeous uniforms with white stockings standing on the back. There were Capuchin monks in brown and Benedictine monks in black. Plenty of secular priests, as religion was well served in the 16 parishes of Nantes. In sharp contrast, there were also skinny, ragged adventurers and police officers in blue coats and gaiters strolling around to keep the peace. Representatives of every social class that made up the 70,000 inhabitants of this wealthy and hard-working city could be seen in the human stream that flowed back and forth beneath André-Louis's window. He asked the waiter who served his simple meal of soup, boiled beef, a measure of cheap gray wine about the state of public feeling in the city. The waiter, who was a strong supporter of the privileged classes, regretfully admitted that there was a general feeling of unease. He said that much would depend on what happened at Rennes. If it was true that the king had dissolved the states of Brittany, then everything should be fine. The troublemakers would have no excuse for further riots. There had already been more than enough trouble in Nantes, and they did not want it to happen again. All kinds of rumors were flying around. Since early that morning, crowds had been gathering at the doors of the Chamber of Commerce, desperate for confirmed news. But there was no definite news yet. Nobody even knew for a fact if His Majesty had actually dissolved the states. It was striking 2 o'clock, the busiest hour of the day at the stock exchange, when André-Louis reached the Place du Commerce. The square was dominated by the imposing classical building of the exchange. It was so crowded that he almost had to fight his way through to the steps of its magnificent porch. A single word would have been enough to clear a path for him immediately, but his cunning nature told him to keep quiet. He wanted to hit that waiting crowd like a thunderclap, exactly as he had done with the mob in Rennes the day before. He did not want to lose any of the surprise effect of his entrance. The entrance to the Chamber of Commerce was strictly guarded by a line of ushers armed with wooden staffs. The merchants had clearly felt it was necessary to assemble this guard in a hurry. One of these ushers now blocked the young lawyer's path with his staff as André-Louis tried to climb the steps. André-Louis announced himself in a whisper. The staff was instantly lifted, and André-Louis walked past, following the usher up the steps. At the top, right on the threshold of the chamber, he paused and stopped his guide. He said,
"I will wait here. Bring the president to me." "What is your name, monsieur?"
the usher asked. André-Louis almost gave his name. Then he remembered Le Chapelier's warning about how dangerous this mission was. and his parting advice to hide his identity.
My name means nothing to him,
André-Louis replied.
I am just the mouthpiece of a people, nothing more. Go.
The usher left. André-Louis waited in the shadows of the tall, pillared porch, occasionally glancing out to look at the sea of faces turned up toward him. Soon the president arrived, followed by others. They crowded out into the porch, pushing against each other in their eagerness to hear the news.
Are you a messenger from Rennes?
The president asked.
I am the delegate sent by the Literary Chamber of Rennes to tell you here in Nantes what is happening. What is your name?
André-Louis paused.
It is probably better if we use no names.
The president's eyes widened with serious concern. He was a fat, red-faced man who looked very wealthy and arrogant. He hesitated for a moment. Then he said,
Come inside the chamber. With your permission, monsieur, I will deliver my message from right here on these steps. From here?
The great merchant frowned.
My message is for the people of Nantes. From here, I can speak directly to the largest number of citizens from all classes. It is my desire, and the desire of those I represent, that as many people as possible should hear my message straight from the source. Tell me, sir, is it true that the king has dissolved the states?
André-Louis looked at him. He smiled apologetically and waved a hand toward the crowd. The people were already straining to get a look at this slim young man who had brought out the president and more than half the members of the chamber. The crowd had already guessed, with that strange instinct that crowds possess, that this man was the messenger they had been waiting for.
Call the gentlemen of your chamber outside, monsieur,
André-Louis said.
And you shall hear everything. So be it.
The president agreed. He gave the order. The men came out to crowd onto the steps, leaving the very top step and a semicircle in the middle clear. André-Louis stepped forward very deliberately into this empty space. He stood there, looking out over the entire crowd. He took off his hat and launched the opening bombshell of his historic speech, which marked one of the great milestones in France's march toward revolution.
People of this great city of Nantes, I have come to call you to arms.
In the shocked and somewhat frightened silence that followed, he looked out at them for a moment before continuing.
I am a delegate of the people of Rennes. I have been sent to tell you what is happening, to invite you to rise up and march to defend our country in this terrible hour of danger. Name. Tell us your name.
A voice shouted from the crowd. Others instantly joined in, until the whole square was ringing with the demand. He could not answer this excited mob the same way he had answered the president. He had to compromise, and he did so very cleverly.
My name,
he declared,
is Omnes Omnibus, which means all for all. Let that be enough for you right now. I am a herald, a mouthpiece, and a voice. I am nothing more. I have come to tell you that the privileged classes, who gathered for the states of Brittany and Rennes, have resisted your will, which is also our will. They did this even though the king gave them a very clear warning. Because of their resistance, His Majesty has dissolved the states.
A wave of wild applause broke out. Men laughed and shouted, and cries of
Long live the king!
Echoed like thunder. André-Louis waited. Slowly, the crowd began to notice his extremely serious expression, and they started to suspect that there might be more bad news to come. Silence gradually fell over the square again, and André-Louis was finally able to continue.
You are celebrating too soon. Unfortunately, the nobles have chosen to ignore the king's dissolution in their arrogant pride. In spite of his orders, they insist on holding their meetings and conducting their business exactly as they please.
A stunned silence greeted this shocking addition to the news they had just cheered. After a moment's pause, André-Louis went on.
These men were already rebelling against the people, against justice, against fairness, and against humanity itself. Now they are also rebelling against their king. They have grown rich and powerful for far too long, causing misery for the entire nation. Now, rather than give up a single inch of their unreasonable privileges, They will make a joke of royal authority and show contempt for the king himself. They are determined to prove that the only real power in France is the power of their own parasitic laziness.
There was a weak scatter of applause, but most of the audience stayed completely silent, waiting for him to finish.
This is not a new problem. It has always been exactly like this. Over the past 10 years, every minister who saw the dangers facing our country has recommended the very same reforms we are demanding now. These reforms are the only way to stop our motherland from rushing headlong into a disaster. But every time, the privileged classes used their influence to force those ministers out of office. Monsieur Necker has already been appointed to the ministry twice. He was fired twice because his demands for reform threatened the privileges of the clergy and the nobility. Now he has been appointed for a third time. It finally seems we are going to have the States General in spite of the privileged classes. But the nobles and the clergy are determined to ruin what they can no longer prevent. They know the States General will meet, but unless we take action to stop them, they will pack the Third Estate with their own loyal followers and refuse to give the common people any real representation. They want to turn the States General into a tool to permanently protect the corrupt system that keeps them in power. They will stop at nothing to achieve this goal. They have insulted the king's authority, and now they are using murder to silence anyone who speaks out against them. Yesterday in Rennes, 2 young men were speaking to the people, exactly as I am speaking to you now. They were murdered in the streets by assassins hired by the nobility. Their blood is crying out for revenge.
The anger of the crowd began as a low, sullen rumble and quickly swelled into a massive roar of outrage. Citizens of Nantes, our motherland is in danger. Let us march to defend her. Let us tell the world that we must free the Third Estate from the slavery it has suffered under for centuries. The only obstacles we face are those social classes whose crazy selfishness makes them view the tears and suffering of the poor as a cruel tax that they want to pass on to children who haven't even been born yet. Look at the barbaric methods our enemies are using to keep us oppressed. It shows us that we have everything to fear from the aristocracy they want to set up as the permanent government of France. Let us declare ourselves completely free from them right now.
The goal of every citizen in the Third Estate should be to establish liberty and equality. To achieve this, we must stand united together. This is especially true for the young and strong. For those who have been lucky enough to be born in this modern 18th century and learn the valuable lessons of its new philosophy.
The crowd broke into wild, unrestricted cheering. He had caught them perfectly in the trap of his powerful speech, and he immediately pushed his advantage.
Let us all swear an oath.
He shouted in a booming voice.
In the name of humanity and liberty, let us swear to build a wall against our enemies. Let us fight their bloodthirsty greed with the calm determination of men who know their cause is just. Let us protest right here and now against any unfair laws that might call us rebels when our intentions are completely pure and just. Let us swear on the honor of our motherland that if an unjust court arrests any of us for political reasons, which are really just acts of tyranny, we will fight back. Let us swear to use all our strength and do whatever nature, courage, and desperation demand to defend ourselves.
Loud and long applause echoed across the square when he finished. He noticed with satisfaction, even a little dark amusement, that the wealthy merchants standing on the steps were now crowding around him to shake his hand and cheer him on. They were not just joining in the wild enthusiasm, they were actually leading it. This confirmed something he already believed, if he had even needed the confirmation. The new philosophies driving this movement had been created by thinkers from the middle class. But the actual need to put those ideas into practice was being felt most strongly right now by these wealthy businessmen. They found that the privileged classes were blocking them from expanding their power and influence as much as their wealth should have allowed. It might be true that André-Louis had lit the torch of the revolution in Nantes that day, but it was even more true to say that the rich middle class had supplied the torch itself. I don't need to spend much time explaining what happened next. It is a known historical fact that the oath Omnes Omnibus gave to the citizens of Nantes became the core of a formal protest that thousands of them signed. And the results of that powerful protest were not delayed for long, especially since it seemed to match what the king himself wanted. Who can really say how much this protest helped Monsieur Necker? Because on the 27th of that same month of November, Necker forced the council to adopt the most important and sweeping reform that the clergy and nobility had been trying to block. On that day, a royal decree was published. It ordered that there must be at least 1,000 deputies elected to the States General, that the Third Estate must be fully represented by having as many deputies as the clergy and nobility combined,